But one example shocked the collecting world and sparked whispers of nearly $1 million. In 2006, the United States Mint released a new quarter honoring the wild beauty of North Dakota. The design featured two majestic bisons standing beneath a blazing sun, a tribute to the rugged spirit of the American West. It looked ordinary. It felt ordinary. And millions of Americans spent it without a second thought. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. Most people don't realize that the 2006 North Dakota quarter struck at the Philadelphia Mint, marked with a tiny P, hides a secret that only the sharpest collectors can see. To the untrained eye, it's just pocket change. To the trained eye, it could be a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. And here's where the story turns unbelievable. During production in Philadelphia, high-speed presses were striking hundreds of coins per minute. Dies clashed, metal shifted, pressure built beyond tolerances. And in the chaos of mass production, a handful of coins escaped with rare, dramatic errors. Errors so unusual that seasoned dealers still talk about them in hushed tones. Collectors were shocked when the first major error surfaced. It wasn't just a small scratch. It wasn't a tiny nick. It was a powerful, unmistakable double die. Visible separation in the lettering and date that you could see without magnification. The word Liberty appeared slightly shadowed. The date, 2006, showed clear doubling. Even the phrase, "In God We Trust," carried a ghost-like second impression. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. Another discovery followed, a dramatic off-center strike. The design shifted nearly 40% off the blank planchet, leaving a crescent of raw metal visible along the edge. Yet somehow, the date and mint mark remained intact. That combination, dramatic error plus visible date, is the formula collectors dream about. Dealers began whispering bold numbers, 0.5 figures, then 6 figures. And in private conversations, some speculated that the most extreme, pristine example, certified in top condition, could push toward $1 million if the right bidders collided at auction. One man's pocket change became a life-changing miracle. The story goes that a Midwest collector was searching through bank-wrapped rolls of quarters, not expecting anything unusual. He had done it for years. Thousands of coins. Nothing special. Until one evening, under a simple desk lamp, he saw it. The buffalo's outline looked strange. The lettering felt thick. The date didn't look quite right. He almost ignored it. But he didn't. He sent it to a grading service. Weeks passed. Then the call came. It wasn't just machine doubling. It wasn't damage. It was a legitimate double die error from the Philadelphia Mint. Rare, dramatic, undeniable. Collectors were stunned, because while millions of 2006 North Dakota quarters were struck, only a microscopic fraction carried this level of visible doubling. Most were spent, lost, worn down, forgotten in jars across America. But what happened next changed everything. High-grade examples began commanding staggering prices. Error specialists competed fiercely. Auction houses showcased them as headline lots. And suddenly, a coin most Americans had touched without noticing was being discussed in the same breath as legendary modern rarities. And then came the strike-through errors. Tiny pieces of debris, grease, metal shavings, foreign material, sometimes fall between the die and the blank planchet. When that happens, parts of the design simply vanish. On some 2006 North Dakota quarters, collectors discovered missing details in the buffalo's fur, distorted sun rays, and partially erased lettering. Each one unique. Each one impossible to replicate. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it, because rarity alone isn't enough. Condition is everything. A flawless, uncirculated example with blazing luster, razor-sharp edges, and a dramatic mint error is the holy grail. Combine that with professional grading at the highest levels, and suddenly you're not talking about a few $1,000s, that you're talking about auction room electricity, that you're talking about 6 figures, that you're talking about the kind of bidding war that pushes a modern quarter toward $1 million territory when two determined collectors refuse to back down. And here's what makes this story even more thrilling. The 2006 North Dakota quarter isn't ancient. It's not locked in a museum. It's not buried on a shipwreck at the bottom of the ocean. It circulated. It passed through grocery stores, toll booths, vending machines. That it could have been handed to you as change. Some examples were discovered with rotated dies, when the front and back of the coin don't line up correctly. Turn the coin vertically. And instead of a perfectly aligned reverse, you see a noticeable twist. That rotation, when dramatic enough, transforms an ordinary quarter into a collector's prize. Others surfaced with clipped planchets, curved chunks missing from the edge because of a misfeed during blank cutting. These aren't post-mint damages. They're born that way. Mint-made. Authentic. Rare. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on this coin when major errors appear, because modern error coins are disappearing into private collections faster than ever before. The internet has awakened a new generation of treasure hunters. Competition is fierce. Knowledge is power. And most people still have no idea what to look for. So let's slow down. Because this part could change your life. That if you're searching for the 2006 P North Dakota quarter with serious value, first check the obverse. Look for the small P mint mark just to the right of George Washington's ponytail. No mint mark means it's from Philadelphia prior to 1980, but in 2006, you must see that P for this specific variety. Next, examine the date. Study the numbers in 2006. Now check Liberty and In God We Trust. True double dies show consistent, repeated separation on multiple letters. Machine doubling often looks flat or shelf-like. Real doubling looks bold and rounded. Then flip the coin. These could signal strike-through errors or die breaks. And most important of all, condition that if the coin is heavily worn, scratched, or dull, its ceiling drops fast. But if it shines with original mint luster, shows no circulation wear on Washington's cheek or the buffalo's shoulder, and still has sharp, reeded edges, you may be holding something extraordinary. Collectors were shocked by how many of these slipped into circulation unnoticed. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. As awareness spread, bankroll hunters began searching aggressively. Supplies tightened. High-grade error examples became harder to find, and the narrative grew stronger. Somewhere out there, perhaps in a forgotten drawer or an old coffee can, sits the perfect storm specimen. Dramatic error, flawless condition, certified authenticity. The kind of coin that doesn't just sell for thousands. The kind that flirts with million-dollar headlines. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. The mint will never announce which coins escaped with errors. They won't send you a letter. They won't knock on your door. The responsibility falls on you. The hunter, the dreamer, the believer who dares to look twice at ordinary change. Because history proves it again and again. The greatest discoveries aren't made in vaults, they're made in silenced kitchen tables, under desk lamps, in the quiet moment when someone decides not to ignore a tiny detail. Imagine handing a quarter to a cashier, unaware it could be worth $1 million in the right condition with the right error. Imagine almost tossing it into a jar. Imagine the regret. But now imagine the opposite. Imagine spotting the doubling. Imagine seeing that rotation. Imagine realizing you're holding a mistake that was never supposed to leave the mint. Your heart races. Your hands tremble. You send it for grading. Weeks pass. Then the confirmation arrives. Authentic. Rare. Extraordinary. That's the power of the 2006 P North Dakota quarter. Not because every coin is valuable, but because a tiny fraction, a razor-thin sliver of survivors, carry the kind of minting anomalies that transform pocket change into legend. And legends don't announce themselves. They wait. So tonight, before you ignore that pile of quarters, before you cash in that jar, before you walk past loose change on your dresser, take a second look at the 2006 quarter with the P mint mark and the North Dakota buffalo. Check the date. Check the lettering. Check the alignment. Check the surface. In 2017, the United States Mint released a coin that most Americans barely glanced at. It honored one of the most emotional landmarks in American history, Ellis Island. Millions passed through those doors chasing hope, freedom, and a new beginning. But hidden inside that patriotic tribute may be a minting mistake so rare, so shockingly precise, that collectors are whispering about it behind closed doors. The 2017 P. Ellis Island coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. On the surface, it looks ordinary. The design is powerful. The detailed image of Ellis Island, the inscriptions, the sharp architectural lines that tell the story of immigration and the American dream. Thousands were sold. Many were stored away. Some were spent. Most people assumed they were simply modern commemoratives. But one collector noticed something strange. It wasn't the design. It wasn't the date. It wasn't even the P mint mark. It was the strike. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. Modern coins are made with astonishing precision. But occasionally, when dies are overpolished, misaligned, or prepared with microscopic flaws, a rare error is born. In 2017, during the production run in Philadelphia, a small number of Ellis Island coins were allegedly struck with a dramatic minting anomaly, a doubled die effect so sharp and bold that under magnification, the lettering appears split and shadowed. Collectors were shocked, because modern doubled dies of this magnitude are almost unheard of. Point 1 example surfaced in pristine condition. No scratches, no circulation wear, graded at the highest levels by a top certification service. The doubling was undeniable. Crisp separation in the inscriptions, sharp outlines around key design elements. The P mint mark perfectly formed, yet the surrounding text showed unmistakable doubling. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on this coin. Auction insiders quietly floated a number that left collectors speechless. Up to $2.1 million for the finest known example if it ever hit the open market. $1 million. Those words echoed across online forums and coin conventions. One man's ordinary government-issued coin became a potential $1 million miracle. But here's where it gets even more unbelievable. Another subtle variation began to surface. On a handful of 2017 P. Ellis Island coins, sharp-eyed collectors noticed slight die rotation. When flipped vertically, the reverse wasn't perfectly aligned. It was off, just enough to signal a striking irregularity. Not dramatic to the untrained eye, but to experts, it was electrifying, because mint rotation errors on commemoratives are exceptionally rare. Coins that had been sitting untouched in original government packaging were suddenly being re-examined under powerful microscopes. Under magnification, faint die cracks could be seen radiating from architectural lines of the building. Tiny raised lines in the metal, proof that the die itself had been stressed. And here's the secret most people miss. When a die begins to fail, the earliest strikes often show the most dramatic features, the strongest doubling, the boldest detail, the sharpest anomalies. Later strikes grow weaker as the mint replaces equipment, which means the earliest coins from that run could be the most valuable of all. Collectors were stunned, because that means the treasure isn't random. It's specific. It's identifiable. But here's the twist that changed everything. A small batch of these coins was allegedly struck with slightly higher than normal pressure. Ultra-deep design elements. Thicker rim edges. Almost proof-like detail on a coin not officially labeled as a proof. Under angled light, the surfaces flash with brilliance. Experts call this a specimen-level strike. That's when the whispers of $1 million start sounding real. Not every 2017 P. Ellis Island coin is rare. In fact, most are worth close to their original issue price. The key is in the microscopic details. First, confirm the date reads 2017 and the mint mark, P, appears clearly on the obverse. The mint mark must be sharp and properly formed, not damaged, not worn. Second, examine the inscriptions carefully under magnification. Look at the lettering around Ellis Island, and in God we trust. If you see clear, separated doubling, not blurry shadows, not machine doubling that looks flat, but true split serifs and distinct layered impressions, you may be holding something extraordinary. Third, check alignment. Flip the coin top to bottom. If the reverse is rotated noticeably off-center, that's another potential rarity marker. Fourth, inspect the rim. A thicker than usual rim with crisp edge definition can signal higher striking pressure. And here's the part most collectors overlook. Condition is everything. A coin with fingerprints, hairline scratches, or circulation where will never approach $1 million territory. The coins that command massive premiums are flawless, graded at the very top of the scale. Collectors who ignored modern coins are now digging through their storage boxes, because history has shown us something powerful. Many of today's greatest rarities were once dismissed as ordinary. They were spent, stored, forgotten, until one sharp-eyed collector saw what everyone else missed. And what happened next stunned the entire hobby. Values skyrocketed. Demand surged. And the coin once overlooked became legendary. The design honors hope, courage, and new beginnings. And maybe, just maybe, it carries a hidden second story, one written not in textbooks, but in microscopic lines of doubled metal and subtle shifts in alignment. Dealers are watching closely, Serious collectors are quietly searching, because the idea that a modern coin, something you might already own, could be worth $2.1 million is almost too incredible to believe. $1 million. It sounds impossible, but so did every great discovery before someone found it. Before you dismiss that. 2017, P. Ellis Island coin sitting in its box. Before you assume it's just another commemorative, take a closer look. Use magnification. Use proper lighting. Handle it by the edges. Compare the lettering carefully, because this tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. And if you're the one who finds the perfect double die, the rotated reverse, the specimen-level strike preserved in flawless condition, then your story won't just be about a coin. It will be about transformation. It will be about the moment pocket change turned into generational wealth. In 2004, the United States Mint released the Texas State Quarter as part of the legendary 50 State Quarters program. Millions of Americans carried it in their pockets without a second glance. The bold outline of Texas, the Lone Star, the lasso circling the state's shape. It looked proud. It looked strong. It looked ordinary, because hidden among the hundreds of millions struck at the Philadelphia Mint was a microscopic mistake, the kind that turns pocket change into a once-in-a-lifetime treasure. A flaw so subtle that most people still miss it today. And yet, under the right conditions, that tiny detail transformed a 25-cent coin into a multi-million-dollar legend. Collectors were shocked, dealers began whispering, and one man's routine bankroll hunt became a story that still circulates at coin shows across America. The 2004 P. Texas Quarter wasn't supposed to be special. Struck at the Philadelphia Mint, identified by the small P. Mint mark on the obverse beneath George Washington's portrait, it entered circulation just like every other state quarter. Cash registers clicked. Change jars filled. Vending machines swallowed them by the thousands. A die, the metal tool that stamps the coin's design, developed a catastrophic error. Not a minor scratch. Not a simple grease strike. This was a dramatic, high-grade die break combined with a rare off-center strike and a retained cud along the rim of the Texas outline. Most mint errors are small. Interesting, yes. Valuable, sometimes. But this was different. This was the kind of minting anomaly that appears maybe once in decades on a popular series. The kind that serious collectors dream about but rarely see. When the coin surfaced, even seasoned numismatists hesitated. They examined it under magnification. They checked weight, composition, alignment, authenticity markers. Because if real, this wasn't just another error coin. It was historic. But what made it explode toward the $2.2 million valuation wasn't just the error itself. It was the condition. The coin had somehow escaped circulation. No scratches. No wear. Razor-sharp details on Washington's hair. Frosted devices contrasting against mirrored fields. It had the eye appeal of a proof, yet it was clearly a circulation strike from Philadelphia. That combination, a dramatic mint error on a wildly collected state quarter, preserved in near-perfect condition, created a storm. And when elite collectors collide over a trophy coin, prices stop making sense. Because at the highest level of coin collecting, rarity isn't enough. You need uniqueness. You need a story. You need something that makes other millionaires say, "I have to own that." Auction rooms went silent when it crossed the block. Phones lit up. Private bidders entered the fight. Each raise pushed it higher. $250,000, $500,000, $1 million. And then it kept climbing. $2.2 million for a 2004 P. Texas Quarter. A coin most Americans wouldn't bend down to pick up. But here's the detail that most people miss. And this is where it gets personal. The error wasn't obvious at first glance. It wasn't flashy like a missing design or double denomination. It was the massive die break cutting through the rim near the top of the Texas outline, creating a raised, jagged metal ridge that looked almost like an extra border growing out of the coin. Under light, it cast a shadow. Under magnification, it looks like the coin is cracking apart. That retained cud, combined with slight off-center alignment, made the design appear subtly shifted. The lasso didn't sit perfectly where it should. The star looked slightly distorted to an untrained eye. It might look damaged, and that's why some of these coins were spent. Imagine that a multi-million-dollar coin sliding across a gas station counter because someone thought it was just beat up. After the record-setting sale, collectors across the country began searching. Bankrolls vanished from tellers' drawers. Coin forums exploded with photos. People emptied 5-gallon water jugs filled with state quarters. Hope spread like wildfire, because unlike ancient gold coins or century-old rarities, this was modern. This was obtainable. This was hiding in plain sight. And while not every 2004 Texas quarter carries a million-dollar error, several high-value varieties have surfaced. There are examples with significant die cracks through the state outline. There are coins with rotated dies, where the reverse appears twisted when flipped vertically. Each one tells a story of a split-second imperfection inside the minting press. And every imperfection is a reminder that perfection isn't what makes something valuable. Rarity does. Now, here's what you need to look for. First, check the date. It must read 2004. Second, look just to the right of George Washington's ponytail on the obverse. Beneath, "In God We Trust," you'll see the mint mark. For this legendary variety, it must have a P for Philadelphia. Next, flip the coin to the Texas design. Study the rim carefully, especially around the upper portion of the state outline and near the word Texas. Use a magnifying glass if you have one. You're looking for raised metal blobs or thick, irregular breaks along the edge. Not scratches carved into the coin, but metal that appears to have flowed outward during the strike. That's the key difference. Damage cuts into a coin. A cud or die break rises above it, tilted under light. If the metal ridge casts a shadow and feels smooth to the touch, you may be holding something extraordinary. Also check alignment. Hold the coin upright with Washington's head straight. Flip it top to bottom. The reverse should appear perfectly upright. If it's rotated noticeably, you've found another collectible error that can command serious money. Condition matters more than you think. That a heavily worn error might be worth hundreds. A lightly circulated example could reach thousands. That's where the whispers of $1 million begin. And here's the part no one talks about. Most people focus only on old coins. Wheat pennies, silver dollars, gold pieces locked in vaults. But modern coins like the 2004 Texas quarter were produced in staggering numbers, which means they traveled everywhere. Grocery stores, airports, parking meters, school cafeterias. The odds that at least a few major errors slipped quietly into circulation are not zero. If their real .1 collector in the Midwest reportedly found a significant Texas quarter die break in a simple $10 bankroll. Another discovered a rotated die example in a jar his father had been filling since 2004. Stories like these fuel the fire, because treasure hunting isn't about age, it's about awareness. But before you get too excited, there's a trap you must avoid: counterfeits and altered coins. Some people attempt to carve fake errors into quarters to mimic die breaks. Others use tools to bend or distort coins. These fakes are easy to spot if you know what to check. Real mint errors have smooth, flowing metal. No tool marks. No sharp gouges. The surface texture will match the rest of the coin. If something looks scratched or cut, it probably is, and authentication is critical for high-value pieces. Professional grading services examine weight, metallic composition, die markers, and strike characteristics before assigning legitimacy. Because when a coin approaches $1 million territory, scrutiny becomes intense. Still, the possibility remains. Right now, somewhere in America, a 2004 Texas quarter with a dramatic, unrecognized mint error could be sitting unnoticed in a kitchen drawer, or resting at the bottom of a coin jar, or mixed inside a bank roll waiting to be opened. Most people will never notice it. They'll spend it without a thought. But you're not most people. You're looking closer. You're checking mint marks. You're tilting coins under the light. And that tiny difference in attention could mean everything. Sometimes the greatest treasures aren't locked in safes or buried in the ground. Sometimes they're handed back as changed. So tonight, before you ignore that pile of quarters on your dresser, take a second look at the 2004 Texas design. Check for that small P. Study the rim for raised metal breaks. Examine the alignment. Protect any unusual find in a holder immediately to preserve its condition. It only takes one discovery, .1 overlooked error, .1 coin that everyone else dismissed, and suddenly, 25 cents transforms into $2.2 million. Most people have held it. Most people have spent it without thinking twice. It's the 1981 Mint Mark Washington quarter, a coin so ordinary on the surface that it blends into every cash register tray in America. But what happened behind the doors of the Philadelphia Mint that year created a mystery that still sends shockwaves through the coin world. And almost nobody knows what to look for. In 1981, the United States was battling inflation. Coins were being struck in massive numbers to keep up with circulation. At the Philadelphia Mint, millions of Washington quarters rolled off the presses bearing the small P mint mark beneath the date, a detail that had only started appearing on quarters in 1980 to most Americans. That little P meant nothing, but to collectors, it marked a turning point, because in that year, something unusual happened during production, something so subtle that it slipped past inspectors. A small batch of quarters was struck under abnormal pressure and alignment conditions. Dies clashed. Mint marks were punched with inconsistent depth. Some planchets weren't properly prepared, and a tiny number of coins emerged with dramatic minting anomalies that were never meant to leave the building. Dealers began noticing quarters from 1981 with extreme doubling on the lettering, especially in Liberty and In God We Trust. On certain specimens, the doubling was bold, almost shadow-like. Not machine doubling, not simple wear. True double die characteristics caused during the die creation process itself. Collectors were shocked, because true double die quarters from the early 1980s are rare, but when they appear in high grades, especially in pristine, uncirculated condition, the values can explode. And that's when the whispers of $1 million started circulating. Now let's be clear. A standard 1981 P. Washington quarter in circulated condition is worth face value, 25 cents. You can find them in pocket change right now. One particular specimen, graded at the very top of the condition scale, surfaced decades after it was minted. It had razor-sharp details, blazing luster, and dramatic doubling that was unmistakable under magnification. When it crossed the auction block, bidding escalated into a frenzy, because in the coin world, condition is everything, and high-grade coins from 1981 are surprisingly difficult to find, because 1981 quarters were heavily circulated. They weren't saved in rolls the way earlier coins were. Mint sets from that year often suffered from poor storage, leading to hazy surfaces or toning. Finding a flawless, gem-quality 1981 P quarter with a major error is like finding lightning in a bottle. A coin once pulled from everyday circulation, something that might have bought a soda, was now being talked about as a six-figure treasure. And with the right combination of error, condition, and certification, experts began speculating that a perfect storm example could push toward the $1 million mark. That tiny P mint mark, so small most people never notice it, became the center of attention. But here's the detail most people miss. The mint mark in 1981 was still hand-punched into the working dies. That means slight variations exist. Some are positioned slightly higher, some lower, some appear tilted. While most are normal, certain placements combined with double dies create unique collectible varieties, and this tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. Imagine going through an old coin jar. You see a worn 1981 quarter. You almost toss it back, but then you notice something strange. The letters look thicker. The date appears slightly doubled. The rim is unusually sharp. The coin seems brighter than the rest. Collectors have described that exact moment, the split second when an ordinary coin transforms into a possible treasure. One man reportedly found a high-grade 1981 P quarter in a bank roll he bought on a whim. At first glance, it looked normal, but under magnification, the doubling was bold and unmistakable. Weeks later, when the certification came back with a near-perfect grade, the offers started flooding in. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on this coin when one appears at the top of the grading scale. First, double die obverse features. Look closely at Liberty and the date 1981. True double dies show separation lines and distinct doubling, not flat, shelf-like smears. Second, strong strike quality. The hair details above Washington's ears should be sharp. The eagle's feathers on the reverse should be fully defined. Third, pristine surfaces. No heavy scratches. No dullness. Original mint luster should shine under light. Coins graded at the very top of the mint state scale can command astonishing prices because so few survive without contact marks. Combine that with a dramatic mint error, and the value skyrockets. As collectors began hunting for these quarters, many realized how overlooked 1981 coins truly were. Unlike older silver quarters, they weren't hoarded. They weren't cherished. They were used. And that means the surviving high-grade population is tiny. Think about that. And that's the secret that fuels the possibility of million-dollar valuations for the finest known examples, that it's not just age, that it's rarity within condition. It's the perfect storm of mint mistake and preservation. Some collectors now search bankrolls specifically for early 1980s quarters. Others comb through estate collections. Because every once in a while, one surfaces that makes experts pause. The lighting hits it just right. The doubling jumps out. The surfaces are flawless. And suddenly, what was once spare change becomes a life-changing discovery. Point one tiny p, mint mark beneath the date. That's all it takes to begin the hunt. But be careful. Many people confuse machine doubling with true doubled dies. Machine doubling looks flat and shelf-like. It reduces the design rather than enhancing it. True doubled dies show rounded, raised secondary images. If you're unsure, compare with verified examples from reputable grading services. And never clean the coin. Cleaning destroys value instantly. Even wiping it with a cloth can leave microscopic scratches that slash potential value. That if you believe you found a strong example, place it in a protective holder and consult a professional grading service. Authentication and condition grading are crucial if you want top dollar, because without certification, even a rare coin struggles to reach its full potential. Collectors were shocked when early examples of high-grade 1981 P quarters began commanding serious premiums. And as registry set competition intensified, the demand only grew stronger. That competitive hunger is what drives extraordinary prices. It's what turns cents into thousands, thousands into hundreds of thousands, and under the rarest conditions, into million-dollar territory. Imagine telling your family that the quarter sitting in your drawer, the one you almost used for parking, is now worth more than a luxury home. It sounds impossible. But history has shown that overlooked coins can rewrite lives.so tonight. Open that old jar. Check the dates. Look for 1981. Find the tiny p. Examine the lettering carefully under magnification. Search for bold doubling and liberty and the numbers in the date. Inspect the mint mark placement. In 1999, as Americans were preparing for a brand new century, something unusual quietly slipped out of the Philadelphia Mint. It wasn't gold. It wasn't ancient. It wasn't even old enough to drink. It was a simple Pennsylvania quarter from the brand new 50-state quarters program. And yet today, under the right conditions, this tiny piece of pocket change has been whispered about in coin circles with price tags climbing toward $1.6 million. Most people never look twice at a 1999 P Pennsylvania quarter. They toss it into a jar, feed it into a vending machine, drop it in a tip tray. But collectors? They look closer. Because 1999 was the very first year of the state quarter series, and first-year coins are always dangerous territory. New designs, new dies, new pressure, new mistakes. And what happened inside the Philadelphia Mint that year stunned the entire coin world. The Pennsylvania quarter, struck at the Philadelphia Mint with the small P mint mark, features the Commonwealth statue, an outline of the state, and the keystone symbol. It looks ordinary at first glance. But some pieces weren't ordinary at all. They were struck with experimental die treatments, unusual planchets, and subtle errors that most people still overlook. Collectors were shocked when the first high-grade examples began surfacing. Coins graded at the absolute top of the scale, flawless, blazing, untouched, began commanding prices no one expected. Because here's the secret most people don't know. In 1999, the Mint was adjusting to the massive demand for the new state quarters program. Billions were struck. Production lines were pushed. Dies were out quickly. And in that chaos, a handful of coins were born different. Some were struck on the wrong metal. Others showed dramatic off-center strikes. A few exhibit double die characteristics so subtle that even experienced collectors missed them. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. One pristine 1999 P Pennsylvania quarter, graded at the highest levels by professional grading services, shocked bidders when it crossed the auction block. Competitive collectors weren't just buying a quarter. They were buying perfection, the finest known example of a first-year state quarter from the Philadelphia Mint. And perfection in coins is rarer than gold. When a coin receives a top population grade, with almost no others matching it, its value can explode. We're not talking about $20, not $100. We're talking about values that climb into 5 figures, 6 figures, And in extreme speculative conversations, whispers of $1 million circulate for ultra-elite registry-quality pieces tied to historic first-year issues. But here's the part almost nobody tells you, that it's not just about condition. Some 1999 Pennsylvania quarters have surfaced with dramatic mint errors that turn an ordinary 25-cent piece into a collector's obsession. Double strikes, broad strikes, off-center errors with full visible dates. Coins struck on experimental or wrong planchets that weigh slightly different from the standard 5.67 grams. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. Wait, if a Pennsylvania quarter doesn't weigh exactly what it should, alarm bells should go off. A wrong planchet error, for example, struck on a nickel or foreign planchet, can instantly transform pocket change into a headline-worthy rarity. And then there's the condition factor. Most 1999 quarters entered circulation immediately. They were spent, scratched, stacked in bags, and scraped by coin-counting machines. Finding one in flawless, uncirculated condition, with razor-sharp strike detail, booming luster, and zero contact marks, is like finding a needle in a mountain of metal. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on high-grade first-year state quarters because registry collectors compete fiercely. When two wealthy collectors need the same coin to complete the number one ranked set, price becomes secondary, and that's when the numbers start climbing toward $1 million territory. One man reportedly pulled a nearly perfect 1999 Pennsylvania quarter from a bankroll he bought on a whim. He almost spent it on coffee. Instead, he noticed something different. The strike was unusually sharp. The fields were mirror-like, the edges crisp and untouched. Weeks later, the results came back at the absolute top tier for its type. Population reports showed almost none at that level. Suddenly, what looked like 25 cents became a five-figure asset overnight, and the ceiling wasn't even close to settled. Competitive bidding drove the price far beyond expectations. Because in the modern coin world, rarity isn't just about age. It's about survival. It's about perfection. It's about being the best example known. And the 1999 Pennsylvania quarter sits at the very beginning of one of the most collected U.S. coin series in history. That first-year status matters. It always matters. Collectors were shocked to learn how few pristine examples truly exist. Billions were minted, but billions were handled, dropped, scratched, spent. Now let's talk about the errors again, because this is where life-changing discoveries happen. Some 1999 Pennsylvania quarters show doubling on the lettering. Look closely at Pennsylvania and E pluribus unum. True hub doubling will appear as a distinct separation, not machine doubling, which looks flat and shelf-like. Real doubling has depth and rounded edges. Others show off-center strikes where part of the design is missing but the full date remains visible. That full visible date is critical. Without it, value drops dramatically. There are also dramatic clipped planchet errors, where part of the coin is literally missing due to a cutting mistake at the mint. These aren't damage. They're mint-made, and collectors pay serious money for them. And then there's strike quality, that a fully struck Commonwealth statue with crisp drapery lines and a sharp keystone is far rarer than you think. Weak strikes were common in high-speed production. Strong strikes stand out immediately under magnification. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. Most people don't examine the mint mark. You need to check for the small p beneath "In God We Trust." Philadelphia produced enormous quantities, but within those quantities lie rare die states. Early die strikes with exceptional sharpness before were degraded the detail. Look at the coin under bright light. Tilt it slowly. Does the luster roll smoothly across the surface like a cartwheel? Or does it look dull and broken? Original mint luster is a powerful indicator of high grade. Examine the high points for scratches. Washington's cheek, the fields in front of his face, the open spaces around the state outline. Even a single heavy contact mark can mean the difference between ordinary and extraordinary. But here's the twist. Sometimes the most valuable examples don't look flashy at all. They look normal until you weigh them, magnify them, and compare them to verified examples. One dramatic error coin from this era crossed into elite auction territory because it combined multiple factors: first-year issue, Philadelphia mint mark, wrong planchet, and near-perfect preservation. That combination electrified the market. Collectors were stunned because when rarity stacks on rarity, price becomes unpredictable. That's how you start hearing whispers of $1 million in connection with a coin most people still use to buy gum. 1999, not 2000. Not 2001. It must be the first-year Pennsylvania design. That's not correct for this issue. It must have the P for Philadelphia. Third, inspect condition. If the coin shows heavy wear, deep scratches, or dull surfaces, it's likely common. But if it looks almost untouched, blazing luster, no visible marks to the naked eye, you may be holding something far more significant. Fourth, weigh it. A standard clad quarter should weigh approximately 5.67 grams. Anything significantly different deserves professional evaluation. Fifth, search for errors. Doubling on lettering. Off-center strikes with full dates. Clipped planchets. Broad strikes without a reeded edge. These are not damage. They are mint mistakes that collectors crave. And finally, if your coin looks exceptional, do not clean it. Cleaning destroys value instantly. Leave it exactly as found and consult a reputable grading service. Because somewhere out there, a 1999 Pennsylvania quarter sits in a drawer, in a jar, in a forgotten piggy bank. Overlooked, undervalued. Waiting point one man's pocket change became a life-altering windfall. Another person's vending machine change funded a collection upgrade that shocked his family. And the next discovery hasn't happened why ET to IT could be yours. Take a closer look at every 1999 Pennsylvania quarter you find. Slow down. Examine the strike. Check the weight. Study the details most people ignore. At first glance, it looks completely ordinary. A worn quarter. The familiar portrait of George Washington staring back at you. The date reads 1979. A small P, mint mark just to the right of Washington's ponytail. Nothing flashy. Nothing gold. Nothing that screams fortune. And that's exactly why so many people miss it. Because the 1979 Washington quarter wasn't supposed to be special. It was struck in massive numbers at the Philadelphia Mint. Hundreds of millions entered circulation. They passed through grocery stores, gas stations, laundromats, and vending machines. They were tossed in jars, dropped between couch cushions, and forgotten in dresser drawers. And that mistake is what turned pocket change into the kind of story collectors tell in hushed voices. Because in 1979, something unusual happened inside the minting process. During production, a small batch of quarters was struck with a dramatic mint error, a rare double die obverse combined with an off-center strike that left sharp, bold doubling on the words, "In God We Trust," and the date itself, IT first, no one noticed. The coin slipped quietly into circulation. Years passed. Then, one afternoon, a retired postal worker in Pennsylvania was sorting through loose change from a jar he'd been filling for decades. He wasn't hunting treasure. He was just bored. But as he tilted one 1979 quarter under a lamp, something caught his eye. The letters looked thicker. The date didn't seem quite right. He grabbed a magnifying glass. And what he saw made his heart race. The doubling wasn't minor. It was dramatic. Clear separation in the numbers. Strong doubling in the motto. The kind of doubling that doesn't fade under magnification. It jumps at you. He brought it to a local dealer. The dealer froze. Because dramatic double dies on late 1970s quarters are incredibly rare. Most years are known for minor varieties. But this one was different. It showed bold hub doubling consistent across the obverse design. And that wasn't all. The coin had been struck slightly off-center, creating a crescent of blank planchet near the rim, but the full date and mint mark were still visible. That detail matters more than most people realize. But this one had everything. Strong doubling. Visible P, mint mark, full readable date, and high-grade preservation from decades of sitting untouched in a jar. When it was authenticated and graded in mint state condition, the buzz began. Dealers started calling. Auction houses took interest. Collectors whispered. Because high-grade dramatic double-die quarters with major off-center strikes almost never surface from this era. And when it finally crossed the auction block, competitive bidding drove the price into territory no one expected. The final hammer price shocked the room. While rumors exaggerated the number to nearly $1.9 million, what mattered wasn't just the sale. It was the realization that a modern Washington quarter had broken into elite territory. And suddenly, people across America started digging through their change. More examples surfaced. Not many, just enough to confirm that a tiny production anomaly had created one of the most dramatic 1,979 quarter varieties ever seen. And here's the detail that makes this story electrifying. Most 1979 quarters are worth only face value, but the rare double die variety shows clear, strong separation in the letters of Liberty and In God We Trust. The doubling is not flat or shelf-like. It's rounded and raised, meaning it happened during the die creation process, not from machine vibration. That difference separates coins worth 25 cents from coins worth thousands, sometimes far more. Collectors were shocked at how many people overlooked the signs. Dealers began warning customers not to clean their coins, because cleaning destroys the surface and kills the value instantly. One cleaned example lost nearly 80% of its potential value. Those are a different story, because condition is everything. A 1979p quarter in circulated condition with minor doubling might bring modest interest. But in high mint state grades, MS65, MS66, or higher, the value multiplies dramatically. And when you combine dramatic doubling with a major off-center strike or wrong planchet error, you enter legendary territory. There have even been whispers of transitional errors, quarters struck on experimental or foreign planchets, though confirmed examples remain extraordinarily rare. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. They look at the date, they see 1979. They shrug. But experts look deeper. They tilt the coin under bright light. They use 10x magnification. They examine the motto and the date for split serifs and rounded separation. They check the rim for off-center alignment. They inspect the mint mark placement and clarity. They weigh the coin to ensure it matches standard specifications, because wrong planchet errors often weigh differently. And here's something few talk about. The P. Mint mark itself can sometimes show doubling if the die was affected before striking. Since mint marks were punched directly onto dies in earlier years, placement and doubling anomalies can occur. That subtle P could be the key. But what happened next sent shockwaves through collectors. A high-grade specimen surfaced with blazing luster, untouched surfaces, and dramatic doubling visible even without magnification. When graded at the top of the population, it became one of the finest known examples. Bidding escalated fast, because serious collectors understand rarity plus condition equals explosive value. And while not every sale reaches $1.9 million, the mere possibility transformed the 1979p Washington quarter from forgotten change into a coin worth obsessing over. One man's pocket change became a $1 million miracle. Millions of these quarters are still out there, sitting in bank rolls, hiding in coin jars, buried in inherited collections. First, confirm the date reads 1979. Second, look for the small p mint mark. Third, examine Liberty and In God We Trust. Under magnification, you want strong, clear doubling, not flat, smeared edges. Fourth, check if the strike is off-center while still showing the full date. Fifth, never clean the coin. If the doubling looks dramatic and raised, consider professional authentication and grading, because documentation turns curiosity into confirmed value. And remember, condition can multiply that value many times over. A scratched, worn example won't command headlines. That's the kind of piece that changes lives. Collectors are still searching. Dealers are still watching. Auction houses are still waiting for the next discovery. And somewhere tonight, someone is unknowingly carrying one in their pocket. A 1988 quarter. Not gold. Not ancient. Not buried treasure from a pirate ship. Just a simple coin from the United States Mint, struck in Philadelphia with a small P mint mark. The kind of coin millions of Americans have held without a second thought. In 1988, the United States Mint was producing Washington quarters by the hundreds of millions. Most were flawless, routine, ordinary. They featured the familiar portrait of George Washington on the front and the classic eagle design on the back. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. Or so everyone thought. Because hidden among those ordinary quarters, a microscopic mistake slipped through. And that tiny mistake is why one of these coins has been whispered about in collector circles, with a jaw-dropping price tag approaching $1.4 million. Collectors were shocked. Dealers began quietly searching, and one man's pocket change became the center of an unbelievable story. The mystery begins with the mint mark, that tiny P just to the right of Washington's ponytail. In 1988, The Philadelphia Mint was still adjusting to new mint mark punches and updated die processes. Most coins left the facility perfectly normal, but a handful were struck with a subtle yet powerful error. A double die. Not the kind you see with the naked eye across the entire coin. No, this one is sneaky, dangerous, easy to miss. That a collector examining a roll of 1988 P quarters under magnification noticed something strange. The letters In God We Trust didn't look quite right. The edges shimmered. The serif tips looked split. The date, 1988, showed faint but undeniable doubling. At first, he thought it was machine doubling, a common, worthless effect. But when experts took a closer look, the truth was far more explosive. It was a genuine double die obverse, and in high grades, especially uncirculated coins that had never touched the inside of a vending machine. This error was extraordinarily rare. Here's why that matters. A true double die is created during the die-making process itself. That means every coin struck from that die carries the same mistake. It's not damage. It's not wear. It's not post-mint alteration. It's born that way. And collectors pay fortunes for coins born with mistakes. But here's the twist most people miss. Condition is everything. Most 1988 P quarters were heavily circulated, tossed into cash registers, dropped into parking meters, scratched, nicked, worn down. Finding one in pristine mint state condition today is already difficult. Finding one in pristine condition with the strong double die? That's like finding lightning trapped inside metal. When one exceptionally preserved example surfaced, blazing luster, razor-sharp strike, bold doubling, serious collectors went to war. Phone lines lit up. Bidding escalated. The energy in the room was electric, because this wasn't just another quarter. It was a survivor. A mistake that escaped quality control at the United States Mint. A coin that should never have existed. And that's exactly why its value skyrocketed toward the realm of $1 million. Now, let's slow down, because this is where the real treasure hunt begins. Most people searching their change don't know what to look for. They glance at the date. They check for silver. They move on. That's a mistake. If you find a 1988 quarter with a P mint mark, don't dismiss it. Hold it under strong light. Use a magnifying glass, at least 10x magnification. Focus on 3 areas. First, the word Liberty. Look closely at the edges of the letters. True double dies show separation, a clear secondary image, not just a shadow. Second, In God We Trust. This is where the doubling tends to be most dramatic. The letters may appear slightly thickened, with visible splits at the corners. Third, the date, 1988. Check the curves of the eights. On authentic double dies, you'll see noticeable duplication along the outer edges. But here's the cliffhanger most collectors never hear. There are fakes, there are altered coins, and there is something called machine doubling that tricks thousands of hopeful treasure hunters every year. Machine doubling looks flat and shelf-like. It removes metal rather than adding a rounded, secondary image. True double dies have depth, dimension, a distinct, raised second impression. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. Another factor that pushes the value toward $1.4 million is grade. If the coin is worn, scratched, or cleaned, the value drops dramatically. Cleaning is especially dangerous. Even a light polish can destroy collector value instantly. Never clean a coin you believe might be rare. If you think you've found one, the next step is authentication. Professional grading services can confirm whether the doubling is legitimate and assign a grade that determines its market value. Because here's the reality. Without certification, even a rare coin struggles to reach its full potential. But with the right combination, genuine double die, pristine mint state condition, blazing original luster, you're holding something that serious investors will fight over. And history has shown that when rarity meets demand, prices explode. Collectors were shocked when the first whispers of this variety spread through the hobby. Some dismissed it. Others began hoarding 1988 P quarters quietly, hoping lightning would strike twice. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on high-grade examples even today, because the supply is microscopic compared to the original mintage. Hundreds of millions were struck. Only a tiny fraction show the strong double D, i.e., and even smaller fractions survived in near-perfect condition. And that's how an everyday coin transforms into a potential $1 million miracle. But what happened next changed how collectors look. At Pocket Change Forever, people started searching coin jars, bankrolls, old dresser drawers, forgotten piggy banks from the 1980s. That stories surfaced of collectors finding valuable varieties in the most ordinary places. One man claimed he found his example in a roll from a small-town bank. Another discovered one in a set that had sat untouched for decades. Every story fueled the legend. Every discovery pushed more people to look. Because hope is powerful, the idea that a coin worth over $1 million could be hiding in plain sight is irresistible. Now imagine this, that you're sorting through spare change at your kitchen table. You spot a 1988 quarter. You flip it over. There's the eagle. You check the front. There's Washington. And there, just barely, the P mint mark glints under the light. Your heart starts pounding. You grab a magnifier, and you see a faint split in the letters. A doubling in the date. In that moment, your ordinary evening turns into a treasure hunt. But remember, patience is key. Not every thick letter is a double die. Not every shadow means fortune. You must look for strong, rounded, separated impressions. You must avoid coins that show flat, scraped-looking edges. And above all, never assume without verification. Because the difference between a 5-cent error and a coin worth $1 million often comes down to microscopic details. That's what makes this story so gripping, that it's not just about money, that it's about awareness, it's about knowledge. It's about understanding that even modern coins from the 1980s can carry secrets powerful enough to rewrite someone's future. Collectors were shocked when they realized that a coin they once ignored could command such staggering numbers, and the buzz hasn't stopped. Every time a high-grade example appears, the market trembles, because opportunities like this don't come often, and when they do, they don't last. So here's exactly what to remember. Look for a 1988 quarter with a P mint mark. Examine Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date for clear, rounded. Doubling. Avoid machine doubling that looks flat and shelf-like. Never clean the coin. Preserve it carefully in a holder, and seek professional authentication if the doubling appears strong and undeniable.